Have you ever laid in bed at night, staring at the darkness, feeling a deep, heavy ache in your chest? Not just physical exhaustion, but a spiritual heaviness. The kind that comes from knowing you gave everything you had today, every ounce of energy, every moment of focus, and yet when you look at your bank account, your career, or your progress, the needle hasn't moved. You feel like you're running up a mountain of sand where every step forward slides you 2 steps back. It feels like a betrayal. We are taught from the moment we can walk that the world is a fair exchange. If you put in the work, you get the reward. If you suffer more, you deserve more. So you grind, you skip lunch, you miss family events. You pride yourself on being the hardest worker in the room. But then you look around and see someone else, someone who seems relaxed, someone who takes vacations, someone who leaves the office at 5 p.m., and they are lapping you. They are getting the promotions, the recognition, and the freedom. It makes you angry, doesn't it? It makes you want to scream at the unfairness of it all. You think, I am working harder. I care more. Why am I losing? If you are nodding your head, if you feel that burn in your gut, then you need to listen closely. Because the story I am about to tell you isn't just a parable. It is the explanation for why you are stuck. It is the story of a man who tried to carry the world on his shoulders, only to realize he was standing next to a lever he never refused to touch. This is the story of Elias, and it will dismantle everything you think you know about hard work. In a kingdom nestled between jagged mountains and a roaring sea, there was a quarry known as the Great Pit. It was a brutal place where the stone for the kingdom's great walls and cathedrals was cut. Elias was the foreman of this quarry. He was a giant of a man, with hands like leather and shoulders that looked like they were carved from the very rock he mined. Elias was a believer in the brute force of will. His philosophy was simple. The stone yields to the man who strikes it most often. Every morning, Elias was in the pit an hour before the sun rose. He didn't just direct the men. He did the work of 3 of them. When a cart was stuck in the mud, Elias didn't call for horses. He harnessed himself to the yoke and pulled until his veins bulged and his vision blurred. When the quotas were high, Elias stopped eating lunch. When the deadline for the king's new palace loomed, Elias stopped sleeping. The other workers respected him, but they also feared for him. They saw the way he walked with a permanent limp. They saw the gray pallor of his skin. Elias was 35, but he looked 50. He wore his suffering like a crown. He believed that his pain was proof of his value. However, despite Elias's superhuman effort, the Great Pit was failing. They were constantly behind schedule. The stone coming out was jagged and rushed. The workers were burnt out, mirroring their leader's exhaustion. Across the valley there was another quarry, the White Ridge, run by a man named Silas. Silas was a small man. He had soft hands. He walked with a cane, not because of injury, but because he had been born with a twisted leg. He couldn't lift a sledgehammer. He couldn't pull a cart. By Elias's standards, Silas was useless. And yet, the White Ridge produced double the stone of the Great Pit. Their blocks were perfectly cut. Their deliveries were never late. And the most infuriating part? Silas was often seen sitting under a tree at midday, sketching in a notebook or drinking tea, watching the clouds. Elias hated Silas. He hated him with a burning passion. He viewed Silas as a cheat, a lazy trickster who must have been bribing the royal inspectors. He doesn't bleed, Elias would growl to his men. He doesn't suffer. Therefore he does not deserve. Then came the year of the great cathedral. The king demanded a massive shipment of marble, larger than any order in history, to be delivered before the winter snows blocked the mountain passes. It was an impossible task. Elias accepted the challenge with a roar. "We will not sleep," he declared. "We will work by torchlight. We will prove that iron will conquer all." And they did. Elias drove his men into the ground. He worked 20-hour days. His hands were raw meat. He developed a cough that rattled deep in his chest. But as the weeks passed, the fatigue set in. Mistakes were made. Costly slabs of marble were dropped and shattered because tired hands lost their grip. Carts broke down because they were overloaded. With 1 week left, Elias was only halfway through the order. Desperate, delirious, and on the verge of total collapse, Elias went to the edge of the quarry to lift a massive cornerstone that had fallen from a wagon. It required 4 men, but everyone else was asleep, collapsed in the mud. Elias grabbed it. He heaved. He screamed. And then a sickening pop echoed through the canyon. Elias fell, his back seizing in a spasm of agony so intense he blacked out. He woke up 2 days later, not in his bed, but in a small, sunlit room. He tried to move, but pain shot through his spine like lightning. He turned his head and saw Silas sitting in a chair, reading a book. "You are lucky you aren't paralyzed," Silas said softly, not looking up. "Let me go," Elias rasped, trying to rise. "The deadline." The king has his stone," Silas said calmly. "My team delivered your quota along with ours this morning." Elias froze. The humiliation was worse than the back pain. You stole my contract?" "I saved your life," Silas closed his book. "And I saved your men. They were about to die following you into the grave, Elias. I worked harder than anyone." Elias shouted, tears of frustration welling in his eyes. "I gave everything. I carried the weight. You sit under trees. You do nothing. How is this justice?" Silas stood up and walked to the window. "Can you stand? I want to show you something." With Silas's help, Elias hobbled to the window. It overlooked the White Ridge quarry. Elias gasped. He didn't see men dragging stones. He saw chutes built of polished wood that used gravity to slide the rocks down the mountain. He saw massive counterweight cranes, systems of pulleys and ropes that allowed a single child to lift a block of granite that would break Elias's back. He saw water wheels powering saws that cut the stone with rhythmic, tireless precision. "You see," Silas said, "you worship the sweat. I worship the lever." Silas turned to the broken giant. "Elias, you believe that value is generated by your muscles. You think that if you are not suffering, you are cheating. But look at that crane. The crane does not care about your pride. The crane does not care about your hustle. The crane cares about physics. 1 hour of building that crane did the work of 10,000 hours of your lifting. But building the crane takes time," Elias protested. "I have quotas to meet today, and that is why you will always be poor and tired," Silas replied. "You are so busy digging a hole with a spoon that you say you don't have time to go get a shovel. You treat your mind as a storage space for worry instead of a factory for solutions. You use your body as a tool instead of using your brain to build tools." Silas poured Elias a cup of water. "I have a rule, Elias. For every hour I spend doing, I must spend 1 hour thinking about how to never do that thing again. If I have to lift a stone twice, I have failed. The first time I lift it. The second time I build a machine to lift it for me. You are proud of your calluses. I am proud that I have none, because my lack of calluses means I have respected the gift of my intelligence. Elias stayed at Silas's home for a month while his back healed. It was the hardest month of his life, not because of the pain, but because he had to sit still. He had to unlearn the addiction to struggle. Silas taught him the 3 laws of the architect. First, the law of the fulcrum. Identify the single action that makes all other actions easier or unnecessary. Elias was trying to move 1,000 rocks. The fulcrum was building a slide. In your life, this means stopping the busy work, the answering of emails, the endless meetings, the manual repetition, and asking, what system can I build today that will do this for me tomorrow? It is better to spend a week building a system and produce nothing than to spend a week producing mediocrity and have to do it all again next Monday. Second, the law of maintenance. Silas showed Elias his saws. If we run this blade for 12 hours, it gets hot and dulls. It will ruin the stone. We run it for 4 hours, then we let it cool and sharpen it. The rest period is not the absence of work. It is the preservation of the asset. Elias realized his body and mind were the blade. By refusing to rest, he wasn't being heroic. He was being negligent. He was operating with a dull blade, hacking at the world, creating jagged, ugly results, because he was too tired to think clearly. Third, the law of the high ground. You spent your life in the pit, looking at the rock in front of your nose, Silas said. I spend my time on the hill, looking at the whole quarry. When you are deep in the grind, you cannot see the bottleneck. You cannot see that the road you are paving leads off a cliff. You must detach. You must step back. You must sacrifice the feeling of being busy for the uncomfortable silence of strategy. When Elias returned to the gray pit, his men expected him to start yelling. They expected the whip. Instead, Elias sat down on a crate. He watched them work for a full day without saying a word. He saw where they wasted energy. He saw where the paths were blocked. The next day he halted production. The men were terrified. We will miss the quota, they cried. We are not cutting stone today, Elias said calmly. We are fixing the road. We are sharpening the tools. And we are building a ramp. For 3 days they produced 0 stone. The anxiety in Elias's chest was screaming. Every instinct told him to grab a hammer, but he remembered the crane. On the 4th day, they turned on the new system. The stone moved effortlessly. The carts rolled down the smooth new road without resistance. By noon, they had done a week's worth of work. By 2 p.m., Elias sent the men home. They looked at him in shock. They were not exhausted. They were not bleeding. But the work was done. Elias eventually became the wealthiest master mason in the kingdom, but not because he worked the hardest. He became famous because he was the man who could build a cathedral while sitting in a chair, watching the sunset. So here is the truth that you need to internalize right now. You have been lied to. Society loves the image of the suffering martyr. It loves to tell you that if you aren't tired, you aren't worthy. But let me tell you, the market does not care how hard you work. The world does not care how many hours you suffer. The world only cares about the value you provide. If you can provide massive value in 10 minutes because you spent 10 years learning how to do it, or because you built a system that does it for you, you win. You are acting like Elias in the pit. You are answering the same emails, solving the same problems, having the same arguments, and fighting the same battles every single day. You are trying to use brute force to solve problems that require leverage. You are a human being, not a mule. Your greatest asset is not your back, it is your mind. Your ability to spot patterns, to create leverage, to organize, to delegate, and to automate. So I have a challenge for you. Not a challenge to work harder, not a challenge to wake up at 3 a.m. I want you to look at your to-do list for this week. Look at the tasks that are draining you. Look at the things you do over and over again. And ask yourself, am I lifting this stone because I have to, or because I am too lazy to build a crane? Stop taking pride in your exhaustion. Exhaustion is not a badge of honor. It is a sign of inefficiency. It is a sign that you have lost the plot. Take one day this week, just one, and do not work, do not produce. Use that day to sharpen your blade. Use that day to build a template, to hire help, to learn a new software, to reorganize your workflow. Use that day to find the lever. The view from the bottom of the pit is noble, but the view from the high ground is where you change your life. Put down the heavy stone. Step back and start building your crane.